Hello and welcome to the Soul Wisdom Exchange. I'm Regina Curtis, founder of At Matry. I'm a soul wisdom mentor and a soul source business strategist. And I am so excited to have Chantel here today on the show. We're going to be talking about soul wisdom and all the ways that soul wisdom is incorporated into her life and work. So, a few things to share just before we get started for anyone who hasn't listened before. Soul wisdom, in my definition, is our authentic ways of knowing and being, or how we receive information and express information. And soul wisdom languages are how that wisdom speaks to and through us. So I love to bring different soulpreneurs or people who really allow that soul wisdom to guide them in their life and business onto the show to explore and share resources and just tell their story. So Chantel, welcome. And how are you today?
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm doing really well. I'm super excited to be here to have this conversation with you.
Me too. Excellent. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us the name of your company and the work that you do, and just let us get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So my company's Wild Woman Magic. I call myself a spiritual rewilding coach. So what that is like think of restoring a piece of land back to its natural state, but for women. So I guide them to come back home to themselves, to their bodies, to their own wisdom, which is why this is so aligned. And I help them release anger and pain and trauma from generational trauma, from childhood abuse, and then take that pain and turn it into their power.
Beautiful. So beautiful. The minute that we met, so Chantel and I met in a networking group, and when I go to those types of events, I always write down everybody's name, and then I leave little notes for myself, beside their name of, maybe there's a connection here or something interesting I want to pursue more. And I'll generally put, a star next to people that I definitely want to remember to connect with. And I was like, immediately, star, I definitely have a connection here.
Yeah.
I feel like in so many ways, and the work that you're doing is such important work and so needed right now. So thank you for the space that you're holding.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your soul wisdom, your ways of knowing and being. So
Yeah.
what ways do you really identify as being strong for you?
I have for a while now really kind of identified just with my intuition and this sense of both in a sense of just knowing something, which can be really difficult for us to kind of grasp onto because we can't explain why we know something or it just feels good. But then also through learning about kind of human design and my sacral center being very feeling through my sacral, um, it's been a trial and error and kind of like just a navigation of just getting to know myself. But it's very much of this sense of knowing and this very sacral feeling, which is a lot of what I already intuitively was doing with my work through kind of bodies and the womb space. So it's kind of funny how we just we know and with when we don't even know, right? We
Yeah.
already know before we know we know. So
We
it's
make our
very, yeah.
we make our way into it even before we necessarily can analyze it or
Yeah.
explain it, right? Yeah.
Yeah. The body knows before the brain knows. And yeah, so it's just a very intuitive kind of sense of just knowing. And the more I've learned to just accept that and not question it, then it is this like full bodied feeling of wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Um, so a theme that's been coming out, I like to bring in different themes that come up for me and that I see with both in my own explorations as well as with people that I'm working with or other collaborators. And one of the themes that has been really present for me over the last couple of days, especially, has been the theme of awareness. Awareness, acceptance, and intuition, and how those three things weave together and really are such important pieces of the puzzle as a whole, right? Like that
Yeah.
wholeness.
Yeah.
So when I say those three words together, awareness, acceptance, and intuition, what is that? How does that speak to you?
Mm. I love awareness as a whole. Like, I've been, I love that we're talking about this because I've talked with my partner at length about this. Like, self awareness is what I come to all the time. And it's absolutely such an important piece to our growth, to our healing, to our expansion. It's we're existing in our bodies and existing in these lives that we have created, but we're not taught to be aware of ourselves, right? That we have these choices. And when we don't know that we have choices, right, we can choose actions and feelings and states of being, then we have a hard time accepting where we're at
Yeah.
in life, right? Whether it's, positive or negative, even if it's positive, accepting that, we helped create that, no matter what it is. So I think those three things are so beautifully intertwined. And then, of course, intuition. And again, understanding that we're making these choices, or, we're listening or we're ignoring intuition. And that leads us to places that we may not want to be. But um, yeah, it's just like we have to be self-aware in order to take control of our lives, in order to really heal or have the things that we want.
Yeah.
I like that trifecta. I like it.
It's a good one, right? Um,
Yeah.
and there's also like one of the things that you kind of touched on a little bit, and this has been a part of this exploration. So I love that it's coming in for you too. Is um, choices and that that kind of sense of there's two things coming in here, and I'm going to say them because I think they're interconnected, but they want to be presented as separate concepts. So one being the toxic manifestation of a certain thing, right? Which
Yeah.
can be even toxic positivity,
Yeah.
and how awareness, I think, is a really big part of not going into that toxic state, right? Awareness and acceptance, actually.
Yeah.
And the other piece of it is choices, and that choices sometimes can actually be a response. It's not necessarily always the external thing. Sometimes the choice is the internal
Hmm.
response to something, not necessarily just saying like, oh, I chose this to happen.
Yeah.
And that is where I think that interconnection is with where we get into the space of things like toxic positivity or blame and shame spirals
Yeah.
and things like that. So
Yeah.
what's your thought on
Yeah,
those?
I think, and I tie back to this, like, awareness, right? When we don't have an awareness of our triggers, of our pains, of our conditioning and our beliefs, then we don't even understand that it's this, like, response that becomes a choice, but it's so disconnected, right? And then it can become that toxic loop without really realizing, right? But then how can we have acceptance and take responsibility for where we're at or what we're doing, of what we've said, if we don't understand? And I always say to people, like, digging into that reason why starts with just asking questions. Like, I feel triggered when
Right.
blank because I remember when blank, right? Self-awareness, right? Then we can dig in. But yeah, it's that not like being connected in. It's always like not coming back, right? You're not connected to who you are or to what happened, or we've like shoved things down. But then
Yeah.
also, I love that you said that toxic positivity, that like bypassing and pretend, this pretending that everything is always love and light all the time, when that's just another version of ignoring and not being self-aware of what's there underneath the surface
Right.
wanting to come through, right? It's like,
It's two polarities, right? Like there's
yeah,
that like toxic loop that you can go into, and that's where that shame and blame kind of starts to happen, right? Or you can completely bypass it and go into that like, oh, everything's hearts and rainbows, and and it's not. That's not it. And
yeah,
there's this deeper, I feel like, at least I see definitely in my own life and have seen in a lot through, evidence of this in a lot of the conversations that I've been having. There is this invitation to take things deeper. And
hmm,
that, you know, there's been a lot of over the past couple of decades, there's this real emphasis on like lifting up and going higher and ascension and, things like that. Um, and for centuries, really, we've been expanding, 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 expanding. But I feel this real call at this point to take it deeper, right? To reconnect, to
Mhm.
go inside, to connect with the land, to connect with each other, to connect with our bodies, and to
Yeah.
really like kind of bring it into that space.
Yes. Everything that you said, 100%. My whole body is like, yes. It's so much yes, right? Because we're living up in our heads, right? Up in logic, up in ego, and it's flighty and it's all over the place. It's not grounded. And manifestation in positive needs to be grounded and into the earth and into our bodies, right? You know how much we've talked about how much I love the earth and being
Yeah,
connected to it because it offers that stability, that right to be here, right? This root chakra where we're connected to this beautiful energy that is cleansing and stable, and then we can move our way up and be all connected to each other. So yes, I there is absolutely this call to kind of just ground down, be more simplicity, I think. um Simplicity is just such a huge word for me this past year, just really clearing out all the extra and just coming
yeah.
back down to simplicity. Yeah.
Simplicity has definitely been something that has shown up for me, as well as sustainability.
Mhm.
That one's been just like at the core of everything for me personally, because I think sustainability really is that what we can accomplish when we have that alignment, right? It's not, there's
Yeah.
we've gone through these pendulum swings of like we're way over here, we're way over there, we're way up here, we're way down there. Like there's all of these extremes, and it's not to say that those extremes are bad in any way. It's just not a sustainable energy, right? Like
Yeah.
it's, if you're in the extreme of something, that's either, it's not something that is really able to be sustained for that long.
Yeah.
um
There's no flow to it.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's very either outward or inward, like it doesn't have that movement. But when I think of sustainability, it's not even balance necessarily, it's not equality, it is this movement. It's constantly in motion, it's constantly giving, it's constantly receiving. um
Mhm.
and when I say constant, I don't mean all the time, all at once, right? It's a
Yeah.
cycle, it's a rhythm, it's really harmonious, and that
Yeah.
feels very much in tune with nature and with the earth, and
Yeah.
something that we can learn a lot about through connecting with those energies.
Yeah. I agree. And I think of like the phases of the moon, this like waxing and waning kind of back and forth
Mhm.
of the flow of it. And yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love the study of the moon. It's something that really just like all rhythms and cycles speak to me in some way. But the moon is definitely one that I think is a really accessible energy.
Yeah.
It's a very
Mhm.
welcoming cycle. Like we have in most human uh, experiences, I think, on the planet at this point. Um, and I say most, not all, but most, that we have a more of a rhythm with the year, with the sun cycle, right? Because it's like, oh, there's
Yeah.
this whole year, even our birthday, we think of our birthday as the sun, the day
Yeah.
that the sun was in alignment, and that's a solar return, is really what's happening. I just want to bring this comment in quickly. Elizabeth
Mhm.
says, yes, streamlined and easy this year, also sustainability,
Yeah.
expansion and contraction. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I think a lot of
Yeah.
people are feeling these.
Yeah.
um, and that sun cycle it's important, right? It's something that is very much a part of our existence. It's very much a part of the rhythms that we have connected with. And that doesn't mean though that it has to be the only one, right? And the moon cycle is, it's so accessible because it is constantly in motion, right? It's that
Yeah.
that connection with more of the flow that's more attainable, right? Like you
Yeah.
can, it's more digestible in a way,
Mhm. Mhm.
is the word really that wants to come through, because it's something that doesn't have this huge expansion. To be able to connect with it, you can connect with it on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. Absolutely. I so agree with you. And connecting with the moon is what allowed me to connect deeper within my body and my own cycles.
Yes.
So I totally resonate with that. It's so digestible and accessible. So yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it really does. Same for me. Like connecting with the moon really has helped me connect with my own body. And I feel this need to say this out loud, that that's for all beings. It's not just women.
Yeah.
Um, and even though there are some very deep connections with women's bodies, or those who have, identify with some of the cycles and rhythms that happen, um, but it's not, it's all humans have that,
Yeah.
right? Like it's a major force of energy that's existing in our being, and so we're all affected by that, we're all
Yeah.
influenced by that,
Yeah.
as with all the
And
planets really.
absolutely, right, and I think we can see that just with the seasons, if is another example of those cycles, right?
Yeah,
So, it's all of that same thing, just in the moon, is it's just presented differently, and I love that it's just everywhere. Cycles are kind of everywhere that show us this, like, balance between masculine and feminine, going back and forth, expansion, contraction. We cannot be external all the time. Nobody
right.
can. You have to kind of go within and contract, every once in a while, depending on who you are.
And that may be different. So I love using the breath, to talk about this,
Hmm.
because if we only ever exhaled, and people who've watched this show a lot of times or listened to it probably like, oh, here she goes with breath again. But like, if we only ever exhaled, we would be depleted, right? Like we wouldn't
Yeah,
have anything. We'd be gasping for air at some point. And if we only ever inhaled, we would be like full, too full,
yeah,
right? Like, and that would
yeah,
become a toxic environment, because we wouldn't be releasing the things that actually don't serve us, right? And then
yeah,
bringing in new and exhaling out. And so cycles and rhythms in nature really can be an external version of that we can get in rhythm with, right? Because
yeah.
we have ways of doing that in our bodies, but then we can also do that. We have these reminders all around us, right? That
Hmm.
we can use those consciously, and this comes back to awareness, right?
Yeah,
We can use those consciously to connect with those rhythms and cycles, and remind us and help us reflect on things that are happening internally,
yeah,
using those influences, right?
yeah.
Using that reminder.
Yeah. And I love that you said about just like, you know, being reminded by a cycle, and it's going to be different for all of us. There's no one answer for every single person. Moon's not going to resonate with every single person, and the seasons are not going to resonate with every single person. So I think I like to think that's why there's so many cycles out there, so that we
Yeah,
can find something that really resonates with our soul, and we can use that as guidance, and to kind of connect deeper. So yeah.
absolutely. So this brings me into the conversation of soul wisdom languages, right? So, as I said, I define soul wisdom as our authentic ways of receiving information and expressing it, but the ways in which those speak to and through us are soul wisdom languages. And that is exactly what you're talking about right there, right? So
Yeah.
for some people will listen to this and they'll be like, absolutely, I resonate with that. Cycles speak to me, rhythms speak to me. The moon is like, it just like I feel it vibrating in my soul, right? And
Yeah.
other people are going to be like, yeah, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I can sit down and listen to, science fiction book, and that connects me with my higher wisdom. Or I
Yeah.
learned so much through watching Marvel movies, or through, whatever. There are like all these different ways. Or maybe
Yeah.
it's running or hiking or construction work, or there's a bazillion different ways that we can connect with our soul wisdom and learn
Yeah.
from the world, the universe, right? And reflect on our own experience.
Yeah. I love that you like pulled in all the other ways, right? Science fiction or construction, because it's so true. And I've
Yeah,
actually said to my partner, he is a cabinet maker, and he used to think like I'm just a cabinet maker, like whatever, it's not a big deal. I just put kitchen cabinets in, and like, but that's not it. Like it's
right.
so much bigger than that, right? You create a space that people create memories in that they'll remember forever, right?
Yes,
That's like you brought this space for them, right? So this is like part of his thing that works for him and it fills him. And so yeah, it's in all areas, and the things that we're passionate about are for a reason, right? Like it's not by
absolutely.
accident. What lights you up is meant for you.
Absolutely. And I would even say that goes into many levels of experience for him, right? Like when he's actually making, he's expressing his creativity,
Yeah.
he's connecting with his soul wisdom.
Yeah.
And I know for me, I can't speak for him, but I know for me, when I am in the space of creating art, because that is a soul wisdom language for me, I receive from it, but I also very much express through it. When I'm in conversation, in an artistic conversation, I am communicating with my soul wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, that
Mm-hmm.
is it. I didn't always know that, but once I figured that out, it became this communication tool for me. And now
Yeah.
I can consciously, now that I have the awareness of it, I can consciously utilize that. And it's not always for the purpose of giving it to someone else or doing it for someone else. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
times it's just me sitting down with my art supplies and going to the space because I need to have a conversation with my soul wisdom, right? I
Yeah.
need to connect with that energy. And sometimes I analytically can understand it, and sometimes I physically can feel it.
Yeah.
It's happens on all levels.
Yes. And that comes back to this, just like not questioning what's coming in, just, trusting those nudges and the feelings that come for us and following them, and what feels good and what brings that out is what's meant for you. And you're right. He is in that space when he's creating. It's just like, that's his flow space. That's his soul space. And he's come to realize that now. Um, yeah. Elizabeth, so
So
thank you for discussing passions and talents. Yeah. Yeah. Because we're not all the same. Like we can't be the same. And the more we can really tune in with our own unique soul and our own heart's calling, then the happier that we're going to be, and the more we're connected, and the more that comes from it. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. So I'm going to
Yeah.
read this full comment just for anyone who's listening later in the podcast that won't be able to see it. It says, "Thank you for discussing passions and talents as an individual spirituality. We have such an idea that creative people are only traditional artists, so inclusive and inviting." Thank you for bringing that up and noting that, Elizabeth, because it is. I mean, I believe that everybody is creative and that everybody is spiritual in their own way. They may not use that language, they may not use that
Mm-hmm.
vocabulary, but the way that I define spirituality is a connection with your inner knowing.
Yeah.
So that has nothing to do with religion, it has nothing to do with any particular spiritual um, practice per se. It's just a connection with your inner knowing, right? Your
Yeah.
ways of knowing and being.
Yeah.
So that can
I
be
love it.
anything and everything.
Yeah. And that's how I see spirituality as well. It took me a little while to kind of get there, and once I did,
Me too.
it was a light bulb, and I was like,
Yes,
okay, this resonates for me. I get this now. I can connect with this now. And I really do want to say also about the creative, and artist thing, is that we are so taught that creativity and art comes from these, paintings or different kind of arts like that, but and that's still very like sacral, like life
yes,
creation, but that's kind of like an unconscious creation. But we also often don't really think about like our throat chakra. Our voice
yes,
is creation. This is
absolutely.
creativity in its purest form. It's everything within us coming out. And so it's not just paint, it's not just clay, it's not just cabinets, right? It's not just music. It's our voice is our source of creativity as well.
Absolutely. Our voice, creativity. So let's define that, right? So my definition for creativity is um, the way in which potential is born into reality. That has nothing to do with art necessarily. And
Hmm.
art is a form that I definitely connect with my creativity with through art, but I also do through dance, I do through movement, through sound,
Yeah.
through visioning, just like having these kind of adventures in my mind's eye. Um, but we can tap into that creativity, to that creative energy in so many ways, right? Like even Elizabeth says, "Eek, yes, oh, thank you." So true. I was thinking about, so 2 days ago, I think it was. I don't know. I've been in this kind of like, um, just kind of like grumpy energy for the last couple of days. And I know it was because I just had all these things on my mind, all these things that I couldn't quite find the energetic resources to move through them. And I was just like, they were just piling up and it was making me feel like suffocated. And
Hmm.
I was walking through my hallway and my cat, like there was something in the hallway and the door was like partially open and the cat like ran under my feet, like right at the point where everything was just like claustrophobic, and I like let out this scream. Like I just was like, "Ah," and like I couldn't stop it, and when it was happening I was just like, oh my God, that feels so good. And then
Hmm.
I like screamed, I sat down for a minute, got my breath, got my energy in alignment again. And then I was like, I'm going for a walk. And it was -6 degrees outside Fahrenheit. So it was pretty cold. And so I go outside, I'm like all bundled up and I'm like walking really fast, like stomping. I was rage stomping. And I
Yeah.
realized I just needed to move that energy. And then
Yeah.
when I came back in, I had all this different energy. It wasn't like some magical thing had happened. It was just like I needed to move that energy. I needed to create it, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's a way that we use our creativity in kind of sometimes unconscious ways or subconscious
Yes.
ways when we could do that more consciously,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, like being more open to expressing those things in different ways that might not look normal or acceptable to other people, right? Like
Yeah.
just stomp, like my daughter does that. She stomps.
Hmm.
And I used to be really annoyed by it. Like, what are you doing? Right?
Right.
She's 10 now. And until I realized that was her way of moving her energy, she would stomp it out and then she would be fine, right? So
Yes.
it's just like
I love it.
finding the ways that work for you. And then I felt bad for like restricting that of her and saying like, stop, why are you doing this? And now I'm like, okay, stomp it out, get it out, and then
Yeah.
it's just over super quickly, and she comes back to kind of a balance, like you said.
Mm.
It's not moving mountains, it's just that release of breath. Like I when you were describing that, I felt this like tension and then this like
Yes.
like I literally took a big breath afterwards.
Yeah, because it was a very physical sensation. So Angela says
Yeah.
my 12-year-old daughter stomps too. Yeah, and she's
Yeah.
actually my niece. So, that's
Okay.
maybe we have something in common there,
Yeah.
perhaps. Um but yeah, it's so true because I don't know, we're not really we're not really taught to do those things. And on top of that, we're actually taught that it's not safe to do those things
Yes.
or appropriate to do those things, right? Like it's not really so I want to like honor you as a parent to say like that's huge, right? That you
Yeah.
recognize that and you allow her to do that, and not necessarily to, let's take it back into the conversation that we were talking about earlier of doing it in a toxic way, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a great example of, if I had sat there in my hallway screaming for an hour, that would have not been a very
Yeah.
healthy use of that energy, right? But I needed that, like, that thunderclap, right? Of energy to
Yeah.
come through because it was stuck. It was not coming through. And sometimes you need that like
Yep.
actual forceful energy. And
Yeah.
then you can let it move in a way that's more gentle, the way that's more productive.
Yeah. And the more you fight that urge, then the more explosive it becomes.
Yes.
That it turns into the hour of screaming in the hallway instead
Hmm.
of just this allowing,
Yep.
and right, without shame and guilt. So that's, so much of the work that I think both of us do is just like removing all the shame and the shoulds and beliefs about how it's supposed to look. And I used to get mad at my daughter, like I said, and once I had that realization, I was like, oh, this is something that I was taught that was not
Hmm.
acceptable for me to express in any way. And so I clammed it all down, and then what happens, right? It gets
Oh
trapped in
yeah.
our bodies. And
I do.
I was like, not the positivity, I was the opposite way, where I was just angry and toxic to be around because it
Yeah.
was just all underneath there. And so, yeah, I saw that happening with her. And now I just say, like, okay, just like work it out. And it's super quick, it's lightning quick, like seconds, where it used to be a whole hour
Right.
thing instead, right? So,
Right, because now she has that tool and you have that understanding, and then you have that communication tool, right?
yeah,
Like you know what's happening. She
yeah,
feels safe in doing it and
yeah,
doesn't have to build it up, so it doesn't have to be this long drawn out thing,
yeah,
and you don't have to react to it in a scary way or in a,
yeah,
internalize it because you know what's happening too. Like
yeah,
I love it. I love it.
yeah,
Um, Elizabeth says, great allowing for expression in your daughter. I wish I'd known more when my kids were little. I mean, we're all a work in progress, right? Like
yeah,
things that I know now, I certainly I could go back and help out my former self with some of those things. But, I think some of the things that we experience, we wouldn't know how to do now and be able to use them in the way that they're needed in this moment if we hadn't kind of done it
yeah,
in a different way first, right?
yeah. I so
Yeah.
agree with that. Yeah. It's easy to have shame over those things that, we wish we could have changed, but then
Yeah.
keeping us stuck back in there instead of saying, okay, but now I get to do this. And we actually have so much ability to change, even, with our children if they're older. I've watched her change and grow, and she doesn't even know that I'm doing it, but I'm, healing these things that I unconsciously did without her even knowing.
And they're healing in you too. So
Yeah.
I recently did a session with someone. Normally I don't talk about like the work that happens in my sessions because that's private between me and that person. But this person actually offered to allow me to use the work with her as like to share it publicly because she was really moved by the work that we did together. And so actually I'm going to be releasing a series of videos that have some of the work with her in like
Cool.
live. I'm going to be sharing that,
Yeah.
which is amazing. Because a lot of times the work that happens in these private spaces are so powerful, but so hard to understand how it actually works. Um, so the reason I'm sharing this right now is because the work that we did together is actually we went back and visited a previous version of herself to uncover some information that is helpful for her in her current reality. And
Mhm.
when we did that and found the let's just call it like the thread that was tying these two particular situations together, right? The experiences she was having as that former self version of herself, the experiences, the blocks she was experiencing as the current version of herself, and even then we took it forward into a future version of herself to see how this, would continue to blossom, and also if there was any wisdom to be shared for her current self from the future self. Following
Mhm.
me so far? I know it's a little bit
Mhm. Yep.
abstract, but
Yep.
um,
No, I get.
what happened is she had this very healing experience, and when she now returns to that energy with her excuse me, previous self, with her past self, there is a different energy there. And she shared with me, she's like, I feel like this version of me, there's a healing that happened there and it no longer exists there. And
Yeah.
so to me, that's an expression of, and I hear this all the time. I've even said it several times and understood it, but this was a very tangible expression of healing things that happened in the past, and
Yeah.
that ripple effect that happens when we work on what's happening in the current existence, how that ripples out past, present, and
Yes.
future to
Yeah.
our ancestral lineage, forward into our children's lives, our children's energy, past into our grandparents, our great
Yeah.
grandparents, even those who are connected through us through communities or energies of, connected energies. Um,
Yeah.
it's massively impactful. Um, it's just not something that we get to see every day.
Yes. Yeah. I love that you're doing that because it is such a hard thing to grasp onto unless you're experiencing it. So I think that's really cool that you're able to do that, and, bless her for being open
Yes,
for that.
it's a huge. I mean, that's so big. When she offered it to me, I was like, "Yes, please, thank you. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Thank you so
Yeah.
much." Because, it's something that, I mean, it can be very vulnerable, but again, it can also be very empowering. So to be able
Mhm.
to actually have an experience where you see this happening, it's just, it's really important.
Yeah.
Really
And I
important.
would be really love to, like, see and kind of speak to her after being, being vulnerable, but being seen in that way is just gonna, even the healing that will come from that is gonna be so
Yeah.
special. The support, the community, the energy around that, it's so beautiful.
Absolutely. Well, you'll get to see that soon
Yep.
when I'm finished with that. But yeah, the second part of that was we actually recorded a conversation talking about the session that happened. So that will be a part of it as well. And it's
Cool.
just, I think that is one of the things that we can do that's so empowering to others. And we do that as healers and coaches and mentors. As much as we can by sharing our stories, right? Our
Mhm.
experiences. Um, and I think that just the more that we can do that, that's why I started this, the Soul Wisdom Exchange, is to have different perspectives and different stories and different ways that we use our soul wisdom, and
Yeah.
allowing and inviting others to do the same and celebrate their ways of knowing and being,
Yeah.
and like really truly just be that.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah. I feel that super deeply, and it's one of the reasons why I love the multi-author books that I've done, because and I know you did an interview with Mia Ling where it's this, like, all of these perspectives coming together and these
yes.
lessons and the ways that they've healed and what's worked for them and spoke to them. It's You can't get anything else like that. It's so beautiful and powerful in one place, so that my story might not speak to someone, but hers will, and we can bring that into one place, into one book. It's just, like, beyond anything.
It is. I love it. Like, I will admit that when I first encountered multi-author books, I had a bit of a I don't know. I had some kind of story in my head about it. Like,
Mhm.
oh, I don't know. Like, it was definitely this, like, somewhere along I had been tainted by this. And, it's funny because I used to love those Chicken Soup for the Soul books. Like, I loved
Mhm.
them. I thought they were I love books that have short chapters that move quickly. Like, I've always loved that kind
Yeah.
of like format of a book. Um, I get bored easily. Like, I think I just, I can't, I
Yeah.
don't read, I read very little fiction. Um, the number of fiction books that I've read that haven't been because I had to for a class, I could probably count on both, maybe one hand, probably both
Yeah.
hands. But it was just, it's just not my thing, right? Like, I love to go deep into knowledge, but I also like that, like, kind of quick pace of things. And but yet when I came into these, so Elizabeth Actually, I met Elizabeth Sossner through, we were published in a book, a multi-author book together as well. Creativity is whatever you want it to be. And she said it was a great experience to do a multi-author book. I'm so inspired by the other stories. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was, I don't know where that story came from, that there was this like, I don't know, it's not real, or it's not a real book. It's not,
Yeah.
it's a scam in some way, is like one of the stories that I had heard from that. And I
Yep.
think that's because there's a, there's a payment in order to contribute to these books, right?
Yeah.
But when you look at what's happening, it's because when you go to a publisher, the publisher is actually backing financially your book, right?
Yeah.
And so you get the royalties from that book, you get paid to be in it, etc. But the steps to go through, the hoops to go through in order to get your book published is quite a feat. And
Yeah.
so when you come together as a multi-author book, what happens, and I'm not explaining this for you, Chantel, necessarily, but for the viewers, when
Yep.
you come together in a multi-author book, you are paying a percentage of the fees to pay the editor, to pay the illustrator for the book, to pay for the, distribution, the advertisement, etc. And so when you look at it like that, like, how is that a scam? If
Yeah.
I pay for advertising in a magazine, I pay to have that space. I pay for
Yeah.
the services of the magazine.
Yeah.
So I think I had to get past that kind of belief system first. And then once I really did connect with the other authors in the book and the publisher, and, all of the energetic exchanges that happen in that space, it's amazing. Like,
Yeah.
so many amazing people that I would not have met in another way.
Yes,
Not all at
I
the same
so agree with you. I had similar kind of blocks that came up. A lot of like, does that make me a real author?
time.
If it's a multi-author book, and I at first was like, yeah, this is a scam. Like, I don't think that this is right. And that was just right fear
Hmm.
coming in. But I know a person, like I have a friend who has published his own book. So I knew that that's like this kind of way of working was real, but it was
Yes.
just like the multi-author part. I was like, does this like reduce my credibility as an
Right.
author? Right? It
Yeah.
doesn't, but I had
No.
to get past that. And then, yes, like the experience is just so powerful because for me, especially, I realized like I want all these women's stories out there. Like,
Yes.
I want to elevate their stories. It wasn't even just about me, but I want to elevate their stories, their triumphs. Like, for my clients and my people and my family to see other women doing similar things and they're healing. And we get to
Mhm.
do that together as this like crazy force, which is just so magical. I love it so much. And then you get to, like you said, connect with these people that you never would have otherwise
No.
and find like I've created these beautiful like knowing, right? When I was on the call and I remember I said to you, like, have we met before?
Yeah.
Like I was
Nope.
like, I feel like I've met you before. And I had that resonance with a couple women from one of the books where it's just like this soul deep kind of connection. And oh, it's so wonderful.
Yeah, I totally, totally agree with that. And I think that, when I look at that from an energetic standpoint, that, yeah, we absolutely, it does. I feel that too, that we know each other, right?
Yeah.
And um, we could explore that as maybe we've met before in another lifetime, but it also could just be this deep resonance. And that was what I was talking
Yeah.
about with that invitation to go deeper, right? Like, we've expanded out far and wide. I mean, a couple of years ago, really, I was focused on expansion, and that was really the theme that was coming to me. It's like expand, expand, expand. And that's when I actually started connecting with people. And I know I've told this story before, but I kept getting this guidance from my soul wisdom to have more conversations. And, when I would ask, have conversations about what, or conversations with who, the answer I would get is, you'll know. And
Hmm.
so I just started listening, and I started feeling for that resonance and understanding. Elizabeth says we do know each other, healers. So grateful too.
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's that energetic. kinship, right?
Yep.
That energetic frequency that is resonant, it is familiar. And
Yeah.
when you allow yourself to listen, receive, and connect on that level, then magic happens,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's I have to I keep meaning to say this. I'm afterwards I have my own kind of in my private Facebook group alive that I'm doing, and so many times in this call the things that you have said is like what I'm going to be talking about, and I just want to highlight that. It's just another moment of just
Mhm.
this resonance of, you know, the choices that we make out of lack of awareness or in self-awareness, and their impact, right? You know, what is the impact of us not being connected to our soul wisdom, to our intuition, to our heart's calling, right? Like, what's the consequences of that?
Yeah.
You know, and what happens when we do connect to it, right? Then these magical things happen. And so just really having that conversation of like, there are consequences to these decisions, and our life is going to reflect that. And when we can become aware of that, we can go, okay, so something needs to change here, or I need to keep doing this.
Yeah. Absolutely. So consequences is an interesting word because and I know we're like at our time, so we probably won't go too deep into this, but I do feel the need to just call that word out for a second because consequences. I mean, I have a background in education, right? And you're a parent, so I'm sure that we've both heard the word consequences used as in like punishment,
Right.
and that is not necessarily the intent of that word, right?
Yeah.
A consequence of me, picking up this water and drinking it is that I may then become more hydrated, right? Like that also is a consequence of me drinking
Yes.
water. It's not a punishment. Um, I may then have to pee. That's also a consequence. Is that a
Yes.
punishment? Like only
Yes.
if I label it that. So
Yeah.
um, it's really important to think about and really go deeper, I think, with the language that we use as well, and really feel into one, is this language accurate for me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Does it resonate as true? And if it doesn't, then what are you getting from that too, right? Because if
Yeah.
there's a resistance, then that's a call to awareness that's happening.
Yeah.
And so, what can you do with that information now? Is that helping you in some way? Is it disserving you in some way? Is it
Yeah.
just a call to be aware, right? Is it just a curiosity? So there's so
Yeah.
much that can be explored there.
Yeah. And I do love that you mentioned that, because it's like I speak to it in that way of like, it's like every action has an equal reaction. It's like that
Yeah,
to me. And I never liked the word punishment because that's like makes me feel like it is going to hurt. And I definitely teach my daughter of like, that's what this means. Like, no matter
yeah,
what you do, there's a reaction. Something is going to follow, and that's a consequence. And that's how it resonates for me. But yeah, like
yeah.
yeah, it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It's just, there's
It's
a
just a part
reaction.
of it, right? Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that takes us all the way back into like the early age of science, right? Like if we want to get really technical about it. But
Yeah.
um, whether they're laws of science or laws of the universe or laws of energy, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, there are definitely some themes that run
Yeah.
together there. So oh my goodness. Okay, Chantel, this has been so much fun talking to you. I
Mm-hmm.
really have enjoyed our conversation. Thank you to everyone who's been here live.
Yes.
Um,
Thank you.
and we will have many more conversations, I know, because this is definitely not the end. But for now, for the end of this conversation, please let people know, and I will put your links in the on all the platforms where we stream. Um, but let people know, how can they work with you? How can they connect with you?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram. It's usually the best place. It's Wild Woman Magic with a K, and any link is just right there in my bio. I do have a couple self-guided stuff that people can do, but usually my stuff is group container. There's a link to join my free Facebook group, but I have a group container that's about to start in a couple weeks, so you can go check that out if that resonates
Wonderful.
for you. But thank you so much
Who?
for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Um, who is this container for? Who
Yeah.
does this resonate with?
This is the woman who's ready for a soul revival. It's called the Soul Revival, and what we're doing is just bringing women back from the dead. The woman who's exhausted, who's depleted, who is feeling unappreciated, who feels like she's the walking dead, like you're just existing, but you want to live, like you want to thrive, and you want to, go in and figure out what these things are that are stopping you from flourishing, from finding your magic, from, you're connecting to yourself and your body. That's what we're doing.
Mm, big work there.
Yes.
And in a very, yeah, it is so needed. I don't think I know anyone who doesn't have some level of exhaustion right now in some
Yeah.
way. So
Yes. Right now,
if
it's so important.
yeah, absolutely. Well, if that is you, check out Chantel's program for sure. When does it begin?
We start February 14th.
Oh, beautiful. I love it. What a
Yeah.
great day. Okay, so we'll have the links for all of that in there. And again, thank you for watching and joining in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, whatever the correct language is for wherever you're watching or listening to this. And we will see you again soon. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank
Bye.
you.